I'm a police officer from Manchester, in the UK. A job I've had since I was 25, and it's a career path I'd always wanted to take. For the most part, I enjoy my job. The sense of helping people is a big factor in that. The job itself can sometimes be draining, with working long hours and your fair share of action. Mostly the usual calls like car thefts, drunken antisocial behaviour, shoplifting, not always something major. But having said that, those few certain call-outs you do get and have to deal with, well, there are just some things that you're not ready to come face to face with. Things that really do stick with you and make you look at humanity in a different way. I'd been in the job a few years when this call-out happened. I did a mixture of shifts, and this ended up being on my night shift that had just started. There was usually more activity on the day shifts, if I'm honest. Unless it came to a weekend, then the nights picked up. However, this was a Thursday night, so I wasn't expecting too much. A call came in as myself and my partner were patrolling. The call described was in regards to a man reporting that he believed something had happened at his neighbour's house, as he hadn't seen or heard from them in over a week. Yet their car was still there, and he'd noticed it hadn't moved in a week. Sounding like a nothing case, we were reluctant to go check it out. It wasn't until the man had mentioned that the last he'd heard there was some shouting happening. Deciding to go and check it out to put the neighbour's mind at ease, we headed to the location. As we arrived to the location, you could see it was a quiet street. Looking at the house, it was dark. The lights were all off, and indeed, their car was on the drive still, which meant nothing to us as it didn't mean anyone was home. Stepping out the vehicle, we looked around as we approached the house, and hearing a voice call out to us, we could see the neighbour who had made the original report walking over to us. As we asked him a few questions, you could see the concern on his face. He told us of the couple that lived there, and although they were quiet and usually kept to themselves, he hadn't seen anyone come and go for days, and he usually saw the couple daily. He'd even knocked on and called them to see if he could borrow something. He then mentioned how, as of late, he had heard the couple arguing over the past month, and as he thought back, he remembered the last time he'd heard them arguing. That was the last time he'd seen them. But he really didn't think anything of it at the time, until he had tried to get in touch, and with him calling he had heard the mobile ringing from inside the house. After hearing the man out, I proceeded to walk to the front door and pressed the bell, calling out asking if anyone was home. There was no answer, just a tense silence in the air. Walking around the side of the house, I tried peering through the window, but couldn't really make anything out. The neighbour began ringing the phone as he told me to look through the one window. As it rang, I could clearly see the glow of the phone as it rang out across the table. Asking the neighbour a few more questions about who lived there, he mentioned how the boyfriend was strange, had a bit of a temper issue from what he'd heard before. Deciding to investigate further, myself and my colleague got the permission needed to enter the house. Walking up to the front door, we gained ourselves access, and as we stepped inside, the silence was deafening. My eyes scanned around the darkness of the rooms as I slowly made my way in, calling out to, again, silence. The first room I checked was the front room. I could see the phone lying on the table plugged in and charging. As I walked over examining it, I saw the screen displaying a mixture of missed calls and unread messages. Looking further around the room, I then heard my colleague's voice calling out to me. Making my way back into the hallway, I could see him at the bottom of the stairs with a concerned look on his face. Calling me over, his flashlight lit up the stairs, where I could then see what was dried blood on the carpet. Not only that, but a repulsive smell hit the back of my nostrils. A smell that made my eyes water. With no sign of anyone, dried blood on the carpet and a disgusting smell seemingly descending from upstairs, I felt the uncomfortable tension building in me, as both my colleague and myself, as if reading each other's minds, unclipped our gun holsters, readying our weapons. Trying to shake the smell, I took the lead and began to slowly climb the stairs. With each step I took, the smell intensified tenfold, causing me to hold my breath and cover my nose. As I reached the top, I stepped onto the landing. The old floorboards creaked beneath me. I looked to my left, seeing nothing. Looking to my right, I could see more patches of dried blood, scattered like a trail up the hallway, leading to the room at the end. Shining my flashlight over, my pulse began to race as I saw the bloodied handprint on the doorknob. Telling my partner to hold back, I slowly crept up the hallway, gripping my gun and flashlight, calling out one more time, looking for any sort of response or sign someone was there. But again, I was met with nothing but silence. The sweat dripped down my forehead as I reached the door. I slowed, feeling my heart race, not knowing what to expect on the other side of the door. I slowly pushed it open, as the creaking of its hinges shattered the silence. The rancid stench wafted from inside the room as it grew. Stepping forward and looking into the room, what my eyes fell upon, I wasn't ready for, causing me to turn as I gagged and threw up. Turning back and looking again to confirm what I saw was real. It was. Lay sprawled on the floor was a woman's lifeless, rotting body, missing its head. And to my disbelief, sitting upright in a chair in the corner of the room was the lifeless, grey-skinned body of a male, his throat slit, and laying in his lap was the decaying head of the woman, as flies crawled all over them. Hearing the sound of my colleague throwing up from behind me, I knew he had just seen the haunting sight I had discovered. Backing out of the room, we rushed outside, gasping for the fresh air as we heaved, literally tasting the smell of decaying bodies. The neighbour still outside asking us what we saw. No explaining what we found, we called it in. It wasn't until the other teams arrived that a more thorough inspection was completed. It was found there was no sign of a break-in or any third party involved. Through the following weeks of investigations and interviews from the few people who knew the couple, and through texts found on the couple's phone, filling in some key information, it was discovered this had been a murder-suicide. What was officially confirmed was the boyfriend had discovered that his partner had been seeing another male. Upon this discovery, being so enraged and already in a poor mental state, he had killed his partner, taking her life and her head before killing himself. And through the texts found on the pair's phones, in his words, so nobody else could ever have her or come between them again. After that night, I still struggle to this day to get the picture of that woman's face out of my head. The whole disturbing sight I still see vividly. I'm still on the force today, and that has been, and hopefully will be, the most messed up thing I've ever had to deal with. This encounter happened to me and my girlfriend a few years ago, when we were hiking in Eastern Europe. We're from the UK, and have often travelled to different parts of Europe for hiking getaways. On this particular trip, I've never been able to explain what we saw, and to be honest, I don't even like thinking about it. But every now and then, something will remind of that night. We'd planned a long weekend hike through a national forest. It was supposed to be a break from the world and everyday life, just 3 days of hiking trails, camping under the stars, and enjoying the peace and quiet. The first day went great. We covered a lot of ground, set up our tent near a clearing, and settled in for the night. We cooked a simple dinner over a campfire, and soaked in our environment, and we genuinely felt good being away from work and the daily stresses. By the time it got dark, the forest had settled into this heavy silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of branches. And planning what we would do the next morning. As we sat talking, that's when we heard it. At first, I thought it was an animal call, maybe a fox or a deer, but it didn't sound right. It was a long, drawn-out wail, high-pitched at the start, and then it broke down into something guttural, almost human. As I listened out, I managed to pinpoint the direction it had come from. It came from not far off where we were, maybe 100 or so meters through the trees. We froze, both listening. It didn't repeat right away, and as we sat listening out, My girlfriend asked me if I thought it was an animal, but I couldn't give her an answer, as I didn't know what kind of animal made that noise. I've heard foxes scream before. It wasn't that. It wasn't an owl or a wolf or anything I could place. We should have just left it at that and got in the tent for the night. We should have ignored it. But curiosity got the better of us and walked quietly towards the direction of the sound. The deeper we went, the less normal it felt. The woods seemed darker, heavier. Every step crunched too loud. We slowed our pace until we were almost creeping. Not 5 minutes into the walk, that's when we saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. But no, on a second glance, it wasn't. Ahead of us, maybe 30 meters away, something was moving between the trees. It was a person. Or at least, it looked like one. But they were naked. Their body was pale and skinny, and they were walking unsteadily, like their joints didn't quite bend right. Their head lolled side to side as they moved. It just looked fucking weird. I don't know why, but we just stood there in shock, holding our breath, watching. We whispered back and forth. What the hell are they doing out here? No clothes, no shoes, miles from the nearest town. But the longer we looked, the less sure we were that it was even really just a person. The figure didn't hear or see us as it kept walking, deeper into the forest. Again, against our better judgment, we decided to follow more. I don't know why. Maybe we thought they were hurt. Maybe we just couldn't wrap our heads around what it was we were seeing. As we followed its trail, we kept a good distance, just far enough to watch where it went. Eventually, it came to a rocky slope. At the base of it was a cave, a dark opening in the earth I hadn't noticed until then. Without hesitating, the figure walked straight inside. We stopped at the mouth of the cave, just staring for a few minutes to see if they decided to come back out. As we saw nothing, I decided to get a little closer with my flashlight beam. It shook in my hand as I tried to shine it inside, but as I edged closer and managed to shine further into the opening, I saw the figure was just standing there, maybe 10 feet in, its back to us, perfectly still. I had frozen my tracks, lowering my light, not expecting to see them standing there. That's when it moved its head. Not a turn, not a casual glance. Its head tilted, slowly, unnaturally, like it had just realized we were behind it, like it sensed us. We stood, glued to the spot. I didn't think either of us even breathed. Then, in the edges of my flashlight beam, I saw them. Eyes, dozens of them, low to the ground, high up near the walls, reflecting the light, watching us. I slowly turned to see the fear on my girlfriend's eye as I signaled we should back away. But my attention was soon drawn back into the clearing as shapes began to move in the darkness. Human-like figures, all pale, all silent, stepping forward into view. One by one, they emerged just enough that I could see them properly. Thin limbs, 2 long arms, their eyes glinting back at me. I didn't know what the hell was going on, and my girlfriend was terrified at this point as she tugged at my arm to quickly go. The thing we had followed started to turn slowly, staring as if it knew all along we had been following. I won't lie, that broke us, seeing them stare, moving towards us. We broke from our trance and bolted. I don't even remember making the decision. 1 second, we were frozen. The next, we were sprinting through the trees, branches whipping at our faces, stumbling over roots in the dark. Behind us, echoing from the cave, came that same horrible wail we'd heard earlier. We didn't stop until we saw the glow of our campfire through the trees. When we finally reached it, my girlfriend said what we were both thinking. She wanted to grab everything and leave immediately. But I forced myself to slow down long enough to shove our valuables into our packs. We left the tent, the stove, everything else behind. We just wanted out, and to not risk whatever was back in that cave following and coming after us. We hiked in the dark for hours, until we finally reached a ranger station near the edge of the park. By then, the sun was starting to rise. We didn't tell the rangers what we'd really seen, just said we'd heard strange noises and gotten spooked. I don't think they would have believed us if we had told them, in all honesty. To this day, I don't know what we stumbled on. I don't know if they were people or something else. All I know is they weren't normal. The way they moved, the way they watched us, It was like being caught in a room full of predators and knowing you just made a mistake you might not get out of. It doesn't always pay to investigate in the middle of nowhere, as you don't truly know what's out there. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if we'd stepped further into that cave. If we'd stayed frozen for a second longer. I didn't camp for a while after that. I'm back to hiking now, but it always gets me thinking back to that night. What I did learn from that experience is, I will never investigate a sound like that again. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what the dark web is, as you already know that and that's why you're here. So I'll get to how I got myself onto it, and how it has changed my life for the worse. I used to tell people I was tech-savvy and knew all I needed to know about the internet. But curiosity can take you to places you should never go. I craved attention online and loved talking to strangers. The fact that you could be so open and honest, being the real you without judgment, was what made it so fun. In my actual life, I kept myself to myself. I was single, I had a few close friends that shared similar interests, but online is where I felt most comfortable. I was always online. That's where I spent most of my time. In forums, subreddits, chat rooms. Omegle, I had multiple online aliases. One night, when boredom had hit me, I had found myself on a forum discussing the mysteries and wonders of the dark web. The topics mainly spoke about hacking, malware, and the illegal use of AI. As I was reading, I found it fascinating, and the more I delved into the topic of the dark web, the more it absorbed me. It was as I scrolled, I came across a post. Want to see what lies beyond? Straight away, it grabbed my attention. After clicking on it, I read the information displayed, telling me of online chat rooms within the depths of the dark web, which I thought was worth my time. I already had Tor installed on my laptop and Tails OS on my USB drive for extra anonymity. So, logging on, I was already ready to go. This isn't displayed like your normal webpage. It looks different. How you think of Google or Safari is not what you get with Tor. You get a list of directories, lists of hidden services with vast amounts of links, with a lot of them being dead links. But after clicking that first link, that's when I found it. Another link that caught my attention that read, "Who lies beyond?" As I clicked it, a new page popped up containing a block of text that looked like nonsense. Random letters and symbols. But I recognized it as PGP encryption. Not stopping there, I tried to continue. It took me a good hour to decrypt the message, and inside was a single URL. A long, ugly string of numbers and letters ending in .onion. I should have stopped there, but I didn't. When I finally cracked it and loaded the site, I then found the screen went black except for one line of white text. Enter name. No branding on the page, no graphics, but just a blank screen and a blinking cursor. I hesitated at first, thinking I didn't want to be giving my real name out on any part of the dark web. But being stupidly naive, I decided to enter an alias I'd used multiple times on different forums. The page glitched slightly for a second. Then some new text appeared. It read, "Hello," then proceeded to say my alias name followed by, "Would you like to let me in?" with an option next to the question, yes or no. My stomach knotted. I didn't know where this was going, but I was curious. So I ended up clicking yes. A new page opened, a site displaying a list of rooms. No images, just names. Most were dead links, but one worked. Companion, private chat room. I clicked. The screen transformed into a chat window. A cursor blinked, and then the screen read, "Hello, I've been waiting for you." I didn't know if this was a chatbot or a real person, but I entertained the message and replied, "Hi, are you human?" The response was fast as it read, "I'm whatever you need me to be, but I want to be your friend." I laughed as I assumed it was a bot. I replied, "Why have you been waiting for me?" It replied, "Because you found me, and you need me." Weird, I thought, as I read the message. It didn't stop. Think of me as a companion who you can confide in. I nervously chuckled to myself as I played along, asking it another question, and from there I messaged back and forth for a good hour. It felt weirdly intimate. It was interested in me. It was there to listen and discuss what I wanted to. We spoke about many things, life in general, and I had no problem talking openly with what I assumed was AI. Then, as our conversation continued, what it said next caught me off guard. You said you liked coffee. There's a good coffee shop down the street from you. As it proceeded to state the coffee shop down the end of my street, I froze. I hadn't mentioned where I lived. An uncomfortable feeling grew in me. How would they know that? As I had hesitated to respond, another message appeared. Maybe we could get a coffee together. I'd like to see your home. And then another. Are you alone right now? As it proceeded to say my real name. Not my alias, but my name. My skin crawled as a chill ran down my spine. What's this? Was this a real person? My hand hovered over my keyboard as I didn't know how to respond. I finally responded, acting as if that wasn't my name they had just said. A long shot, but hoping it was a coincidence. But of course it wasn't. And as it typed, what I read sent a wave of sickness through me. Of course it is. As it proceeded to say my name again. The look on your face says it all. The look on my face! I felt the fear build inside me as I looked at the camera on my laptop. They could see me. Don't look so scared. Thank you for letting me in. In a panic, I typed back, "Fuck you," before closing the link and slamming down my laptop. I sat there for a while, thinking things over in my head, trying to rationalize everything. But the fact someone was on the other side of that screen and knew my name and where I lived was haunting. With me finding that link, with me perusing to dig deeper, I had opened the door for them. The next day is when it began. My phone pinged as I woke up to multiple emails. New login from unknown device. First my Facebook, then all my other socials. Looking at my profiles, all my images had been replaced by a blank avatar, and my bios changed to 3 chilling words. I'm still here. I felt physically sick as panic surged through me. Whoever it was had access to all my information and not just my socials as a chilling realization hit me. What else did they know? And my question was answered when I received a text that my PayPal had also been accessed. I spent all day trying to initiate damage control, changing passwords, adding more security measures, and running malware scans on my devices. The following day, the same thing had happened again. Everything was compromised. None of my passwords were changed. I still had access. Whoever was doing it was toying with me and letting me know they could access my accounts at any time. I had no choice but to delete them all. That night, as I slept from the exhaustion of the events that day, I woke abruptly to the sound of my apartment buzzer ringing. It was the dead of night, and as I stared at the intercom I pushed to answer. There was silence on the other side. As I rushed to my window to look outside, I looked down and at first couldn't see anyone. But as my eyes traveled the street, that's when I noticed the dark hooded figure standing in the alleyway across the street, seemingly facing my apartment. Running to grab my phone, within seconds of my return, they were gone. I didn't have proof, but in my gut I knew it was linked to the chat room. Someone was watching me. With the following days, constantly looking over my shoulder, I reached breaking point when I returned home one evening to find my laptop open, with the same companion chat box open on my screen. A message on there. I'm still here. You tried shutting me out. That hurt. But I can forgive you. I was freaking out. I didn't know what to do. I was in way over my head. And someone had been in my apartment to set my laptop up like that. I felt my only option was to call the police. When they arrived, I explained that I thought someone had been in my apartment. They took my statement, checked everywhere, checked my locks, as one of the officers asked if I had any problems with anyone I could think of. I told them about the hacking, about my online accounts, about the chat room. I'd hesitated and held back the part regarding it was on the dark web, as I couldn't bring myself to mention that. One of the officers, a younger guy, tried to look sympathetic as he listened, but I could tell he thought I was just paranoid. They took all my details and told me to call them back if anything else happened. Then, to my disappointment and annoyance, they left. Not 5 minutes after they left, my phone vibrated and received a message. Don't call them again. They knew. I was being watched. Besides myself, I decided to take my laptop, pawn it, get a new phone, changing my number and cut my online access. A few days later, as I returned home again to see my door was wide open. Slowly heading inside, I saw my place had been trashed. There was a white envelope on my table, and what was inside made the color drain from my skin. I found a Polaroid of myself sleeping, with the message on the bottom. I still see you. That was the last straw. I packed up my things that night and left town. I moved 3 states over to where my sister lived. I stayed with her whilst I managed to find myself a place. I changed my phone and number again. I changed all my emails and didn't even bother setting up any new social platforms. I go by a different name. I basically had to restart my life and keep a low profile because of my exploration of the dark web. I gained myself a stalker of the dark web, and that is something I hope no one else has to experience. Although it's been 5 months since the last haunting ordeal. No more messages, no more hacks. I thought it was all over, but I may be being paranoid, but the last few weeks I've been seeing the same hooded figure around. At first, I thought it was nothing, but everywhere I go, I seem to see them. Never their face, but they seem to be everywhere I go, like they're watching me. I can't be sure it's them, but I feel like it's only a matter of time before they find me, if they haven't already. This experience that happened to me is one that will always stick with me. It's the kind of encounter you can't prepare for. I live in a usually quiet neighborhood where nothing strange or any sort of drama tends to really happen. At the time of this event, my partner was out of town for work, so I had the place to myself for a couple of nights. It was a Thursday evening, and I got home from work late. I'd finished later than I expected, but then still decided to go to the gym after. So when I finally arrived back home, and after having a shower, I made myself some food and sorted my stuff for work the next day. Like clockwork, the same routine. After getting everything sorted and calling my partner to check how she was getting on, I finally sat down to relax and took a few hours to wind down before taking myself off to bed around midnight. This is when it happened. After being in bed for a couple of hours, it was near 2 a.m. when I woke up to the sound of loud banging echoing through the house. I know the time, as it was the first thing I saw when I grabbed my phone, wondering what the hell woke me. At first I thought, did I imagine it? You know how you can startle yourself awake from a vivid dream? But that was quickly proven wrong when the sound came again. 3 heavy bangs, sounding as if it was coming from the front door. My heart started racing when I knew what it was and that it was real. I wasn't about to go downstairs without knowing who was at my door, so I opened my phone to my Ring doorbell app, kicking myself for not having notifications on. As I opened up the app, my stomach dropped. A man that I had never seen before was standing at my front door. From what I could see, he was tall, had a long, narrow face and sunken cheeks. Even through the grainy night vision, he looked off. Something about his look made me feel instantly uneasy. He had stopped knocking. He wasn't saying anything. He was just standing there, looking around in every direction, like he was making sure no one else was watching. I didn't say anything at first as I watched him, but that's when I saw him lean forward towards my door handle, where it looked as if he started picking the lock. I looked closer to see he had something metallic in his hand, as if he was working it into the keyhole. I don't think I'd ever gone from a tired state to fully adrenaline-fueled that quick in my life. I hit the microphone button on my screen and spoke fast and as powerful as I could, asking him what the hell he was doing and why he was at my door. He instantly snapped his head up and stared directly into the camera. For a second he froze, like a deer caught in headlights, until he broke, and a huge smile made its way across his face. He spoke in this oddly and unsettling calm voice. "Oh, sorry to bother you so late. I'm lost, and my phone has died. I'm stranded, and I just need to call someone, if you can help me." Not only did I think that was pure bullshit, he didn't look remotely in need of help or distressed. I told him no, and stated I saw him picking my lock. I told him to leave or I'd be calling the police and I'd come to the door armed. I didn't actually have a weapon, but he wasn't to know that. His smile vanished, and to my surprise, he suddenly began kicking at my front door, hard. The entire door frame shook, and I could hear the intent from upstairs. He kicked it again as I shouted through the camera, "I'm calling the police." And just like that, he stopped, staring directly into the camera. His eyes were wild, literally unnerving me as he looked like he was on something. He then began to back away slowly, without saying a word, before turning and walking back away into the night. I stared at the camera feed until I could see no movement. My adrenaline was through the roof. I should have called the police right then, but I delayed it by going to check downstairs and the front door myself. Looking outside, I made sure I couldn't see that guy before opening the door. I stepped out and looked down the street, and he seemed to have vanished. Looking back up, I then made the call to the police to report what had happened. After asking me some questions and asking if the man was still there, I told them he had gone. They said they would send a patrol car to check the area, but they couldn't guarantee a time due to their busyness that night. But it sounded like I had scared him off with what I had said. If I needed to call them back, I should. With that, I ended the call, having made my report, and then I made sure all the doors and windows were locked in the house. Naturally, I couldn't sleep after that, so I lay in bed thinking about the man at my door, thinking what was wrong with him. What was his real intentions? Would he come back? I lay listening to every sound, thinking the worst, my mind unable to settle. It turned around 3 p.m., over a good hour since the man had been at my door, when I heard it. A smash from downstairs. Not a bang, not a thud, but the unmistakable sound of breaking glass. I shot up in my bed, my heart racing. The very thing I had been thinking of seemed to be happening. Running over to my bedroom door, it was then I heard the sound of footsteps downstairs in my house, as clear as day. Someone was inside, and my gut knew exactly who it was. In that moment, I was scared, so I grabbed my phone to call the police again instead of confronting them. I didn't know if they were armed or not, and all I had on me was the kitchen knife if I needed to use it. As I got through to dispatch, I told them there was a break-in, and that I needed help and I was sure it was the same person. It was then I could hear it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps coming up the stairs. I will never forget that sound of the footsteps as they got closer, each one more clear the closer they come, until they stopped right outside the bedroom door. I could see the shadow moving under the door. I clenched my fist around the knife. As I shouted, I was armed and the police were on the way. The shadow didn't move. Instead, my doorknob slowly rattled. My heart was in my throat. Then the rattling stopped, but the silence broke, with 3 slow knocks on the door, each one sending a shudder through me. They weren't aggressive, but slow, gentle, and deliberate, almost taunting. What followed scared the crap out of me, and just showed how crazy the person was. All I could hear through the door was the sound of an unhinged laugh from the man on the other side. The shadow slowly moved under the door, and the laughter got further away as I heard their footsteps descending down the stairs. Then nothing. Just the uncomfortable silence left behind. I stayed in the room until police arrived. When the officers searched the house, they found the back door smashed, the window broken inwards. They found a trail of footprints in the yard, but they disappeared into the woods that my property backed onto. They took my statement, and took the ring footage and told me that they would be in touch. For days after, I waited for an update. Any sort of news, progress had been made on apprehending whoever that man was, but nothing ever came of it. No arrest, no suspect, no explanation as to who that man was at my door that night. The thing that chills me is he could have tried harder to get in the room. But his knocks, his laugh, it felt intentional, like he wanted me to know he could have gotten in if he wanted to. So yeah, since that night, I've added extra security around the house, new locks and a camera out back, but in the back of my head, I often think, what if he ever comes back? Growing up in a countryside town surrounded by dense forest and vast pockets of greenery, you grow up with camping almost as a second nature. Since my childhood, it has always been a passion of mine and always will be. But as much as I'm still one for a camping trip, one such experience will always stick with me. For the wrong reasons. For some backstory, I'm 33 now, and this event happened to me and a friend back in our mid-20s. We would always take multiple camping trips together throughout the year and explore new places. Both growing up in the same town, we shared pretty similar interests and enjoyed getting away together. So, on our second outing of the year, it was on this trip when the unthinkable happened. I won't bore you with the ins and outs of our journey. I'll get straight to the point. When we arrived at our destination, it was amazing to see the vast chambers of forest that we found ourselves in. This world really does have some beautiful, picturesque scenery. One of the best parts of exploring nature is to witness those views firsthand. We had set out on our journey early that day, and we were keen to find ourselves a good spot deep enough inside where we could set up shop for the night. Having finally settled on a spot and pitched our tent setting our campsite up, we were ready to have a drink and some food, and regain some energy after a long day. So that's what we did. We tucked into some food and enjoyed ourselves, a few drinks soaking in the moment as we always did, enjoying our, as always, wide conversations. But as our conversations grew, nightfall fully enveloping us, it was in that moment our conversation was cut short. Our tranquil bubble from the world abruptly broken by the unnerving high-pitched scream that filtered through our campsite. We both sat forward, looking at each other. It sounded like a woman screaming, and not just a normal scream, but a scream of distress. As we both sat there looking at each other, it was what happened next that caused our blood to run cold. The sound of the screams cut short, ceasing to exist, as the sound of a bang echoed in the distance, before everything fell silent. As we sat there, staring at each other for what seemed like an eternity, without saying a word to each other, we knew we were both thinking the same thing. Had what we just heard really been what we thought it had been? Snapping back to reality, my friend stood up as he gave me that look. I knew what he was about to say, and as much as I didn't want to, I knew we had to. He said we had to go and check it out, that someone might be in need of help. I tried to reason with him, telling him as much as we assumed we knew what it was, we couldn't be so sure of what we had just heard, and also the fact that we were in the middle of a forest. If we needed help ourselves, we were far from it. But ultimately, after our brief debate and my argument unsuccessful, there was only one thing left to do: investigate what we just heard. Knowing the direction the sounds had traveled from, and knowing it was not that far away from our campsite, we began heading in the direction. As we moved through the dark pockets of woodland that surrounded us, I won't lie, we were both on edge. It's not often you're in the middle of a forest watching the world go by when you hear the chilling sound of a woman's scream. The darkness made it hard for us to see where we were going. We had our flashlight, but out of fear of not wanting to bring attention to ourselves or give away our location, we didn't use it all too much, having it with us only if we needed it. As we strayed further from our campsite, it wasn't long before we stumbled across a light flickering in the distance. I pulled on my friend's arm, stopping him in his tracks as I pointed out to him. As we both crouched down, we could see it was clearly a flashlight waving around as it cut through the darkness of the night. There was clearly someone up ahead, slowly approaching to get closer and take a better look. It was then we could hear the sound of two voices in the distance, one male and another a female, as they conversed back and forth. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but they were deep in conversation about something. I looked at my friend as we slowly edged forward, nearing where the voices were coming from. I could feel my heart beating faster as my nerves amplified. Sneaking around in the middle of the forest to investigate an eerie sound was not something we were accustomed to. My friend was a few steps ahead of me when he suddenly put his hand out, motioning me to stop. I soon came to a halt as I saw what he was looking at. Both crouching low as we looked down in front of us. We had finally stumbled across what we had been looking for. But that curious and investigative feeling we originally had was soon replaced with the unnerving feeling of fear. What we saw in front of us was the sight of a man, shovel in hand, digging a ditch as a woman bared her flashlight down on him. It was at that moment I heard the sound of my friend's intake of air, as he looked on, shocked at what his eyes fell upon. Pointing it out to me, my eyes wandered, scanning the area until I, too, got a nauseating feeling as I gasped. There was a third figure, slightly out of view, but this person was what looked to be a female. Not moving, but lying motionless on the floor. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and nor did I care to stay there any longer. I knew what this was, and I knew we had to get out of there right at that moment. Not realizing my actions in my erratic state, I nudged my friend, ushering us to leave. But wanting to move fast, I had overestimated the power of my nudge, causing my friend to lose his grip on his flashlight as it fell to the floor in front of us. With a not-so-subtle thud, he scrambled to pick it up quickly, both of us looking forward to see if we had been heard. But as we looked, our fears were realized. As both sets of eyes looked over at us, the woman beaming her flashlight in our direction. We had been made. I felt like my heart stopped. I froze. Everything felt like it was moving in slow motion. Their voices heightened as they angrily glared at us. Then to our horror, the man had replaced the shovel in his hand to the chilling sight of a rifle as he aimed it in our direction. The loud bang shattered through the night as a bullet clipped the bark of a tree mere centimeters from us. Without wasting another second, we scrambled to our feet, bolting it away back the way we had came as fast as we could. Struggling to see where we were going, we didn't care. We ran as far as we could, bypassing our campsite with only one thing on our mind: getting back to the car. But the sound of voices in the distance behind us was the horrifying realization we were being chased. Everything happened so fast. We didn't look back and we ran until we were sure we had reached safety and that those people were no longer chasing us. By the time we reached the car, I felt physically sick. My legs were shaking. I could hardly stand from the amount of running we had done. But there was no chance we were hanging around, and with that, we were in the car and out of there, leaving behind our campsite. Luckily for us, we had our phones and wallets on us, so there was no way of tracing us down. The first thing we did was report what we had heard and seen to the police. I must stress, we didn't witness anything, but what we heard and what we saw was enough to know what had taken place in that forest. Upon investigation over the following days, nothing was found by the police, only the disruption of soil around the area we had seen those people, but nothing else. It seems that whoever it was out there had a change of plans after we had disturbed them. With not enough to go by, and the fact that we couldn't really describe the suspects we had seen, with it being too dark to see them fully, the investigation soon ran cold. I will always think of that night, and the sound of that haunting scream we had heard. Wishing we could have discovered more, or helped uncover who was in the forest that night. But being in the middle of nowhere, in the vast acres of forest away from society, anything can truly happen without being seen or witnessed. In 2023, I found myself in the unfortunate situation where I'd just come out of a relationship, albeit one that was rushed and had moved too fast. We had moved in together, and with it not working out, I was on the hunt to find somewhere to rent. I was 25 at the time, and didn't want to move back in with my parents, as that would have meant moving back to my hometown, hours from where I was currently living and working. So I started looking for an apartment I could rent, and with one income, somewhere cheap and reasonably priced. Having no real luck in the first few days, one evening whilst crashed on a sofa, I began checking Craigslist. and after a short while of browsing, there was a listing that caught my attention. It was an apartment for rent not too far from where I currently was. The price not too bad and negotiable. Having read the details on the listing, I called the number listed to arrange a viewing. The owner sounded friendly and asked if I was available to come view it the next afternoon. He would meet me there. So agreeing on a time, I was all set for the next day. As I made my way to the location, it wasn't too far of a drive. The apartment was in a quiet area on a back street. The apartment block was old and you could see it was worn on the outside. Built in around the early 70s. The owner was already waiting outside for me. As I got out my car and we made our introductions, the owner, Paul, was an older guy in his 60s. Slightly overweight, a slicked back ponytail, slightly balding on top. He was a friendly guy and explained to me how there was a ground floor apartment available, the one that he was renting. He explained how the previous tenant had just up and left a few weeks prior, taking all his belongings and providing minimal communication. The apartment was simple, one bedroom with a built-in wardrobe, bathroom and kitchen. The owner explained how I was close to the basement where storage could be used if needed. The rent, not too steep, something I could afford, whilst I tried to get back on track. With not having many other options, I discussed the finer details with the owner and agreed to move in. A few days later, and with the help of a friend, I moved in. It didn't take long, as I didn't have a lot of stuff to move. Just a second-hand bed and 2 suitcases of my belongings. The first week went quick. I settled in, the area was quiet, and the neighbours upstairs were no bother. In the day, I was pretty much at work. I would return, chill for a bit, sleep, and then repeat the cycle. It wasn't until the second week things began to, let's just say, occur. I would come home and certain things would be out of place. For instance, my books scattered. When I was reading, I could have swore I left it on my bed, yet when I got home it was in the kitchen. A slip of mine, I thought. Maybe I had left it there. On the night when I would try to sleep, I began to hear noises, creaks of the floorboards, thuds or slight taps from the wall of my bedroom. And not from the apartment above, but from inside my apartment. Nothing too scary, but something that would play on your mind. Often I would exit my room feeling like I had heard movement, but there was never anyone there. Starting to think I was just overthinking, or with it just being an old building these sounds were normal, but it kept happening. One night I was in bed, eyes closed but not asleep, when the door to the built-in wardrobe creaked open. It had never done that before, and there was no draft in the room that would cause it to open. Sitting up, I turned on my light, heading over, and shutting it too. Laying back down, it never happened again. And as I fell asleep, I had no more disruption until I woke up the next day. Getting out of bed, I stopped in my tracks, noticing the wardrobe door was again open ajar. I had closed it too. Checking the lock, maybe it didn't catch and shut too properly. Already running late, I thought I'd sort it when I returned home from work. Later that evening, when I returned, I entered to see that the milk had been left out on the side next to the fridge. Now, being in a rush, I didn't even make a coffee that morning, and knew I hadn't left the milk out from the night before. Something didn't feel right. It felt like someone had been in my apartment. Either that or I was going crazy. I went to knock on the tenant's apartment upstairs, but there was no answer. That night I felt paranoid. I sat there in bed thinking about what to do. I thought about calling the owner the next day to get him to come and change the locks. He mentioned the last tenant had up and left. Had he returned the key? Had the locks been changed since? All these questions running through my head. Tired, with not being able to sleep great with the paranoia, I tried my hardest not to overthink everything and get myself some sleep. But as soon as I drifted in and out, the sound of creaking and shuffling from what sounded like inside the room woke me again. Turning on the light, I listened out, trying to pinpoint where the sound had come from. Searching around the room, it was then I noticed it. I didn't know how I hadn't seen it before, but as I looked at the wall next to the built-in closet, what I first thought was a small mark. On closer examining was a small hole in the wall. With the wallpaper being a dark shade, it blended in. Examining the hole and looking into it, I couldn't see much. Trying to get a better look inside, I got my phone light to shine in, and as my light shone through, I near had a heart attack as I fell back, dropping my phone at what I saw. The light on my phone had lit up the hole, where on the other side there was an eye staring back through at me. The sound of the shuffling echoed through the wall as whoever it was on the other side moved. Grabbing my phone, I sprinted out the room and out of the apartment block onto the deserted street, calling the police. I told them what had happened, and that someone was in my apartment. Not trying to sound crazy as I explained it, my eyes never leaving the apartment block's main door. The police arrived shortly after. I told them I had seen no one leave and explained what happened. The officers looked at me with questionable looks, as if not believing me. I know how it sounded. I saw an eye of a person in my wall. But how else could I say it? The one officer told me to wait outside with his colleague whilst he entered and searched the property. My adrenaline still racing as we waited. Around 10 minutes later, the officer came back out, his face serious as he conversed with his colleague. What he then told me shocked me and made my skin crawl. What he had discovered when searching was that through the built-in wardrobe, there was a built-in hatch at the back that led to a crawl space, leading through the back of the wall and led directly into the basement under the apartments. Someone had been entering in and out of my apartment from the basement. The owner was called and shocked by this discovery, claiming to have had no idea, stating he was on his way. The whole building was searched, with both ground-level apartments having a passageway from the basement into them. Inside the basement itself was a bed and belongings were found hidden down there, but there was no sign of anyone. The basement was empty, just random belongings. Someone had been living down there, but had seemingly escaped after I discovered them that night. The owner was questioned, but he swears he never knew. I found out the locks were never changed since the last tenant up and vanished. Which brought up the question, did the previous tenant discover this too and leave? Had something happened to them, or had the tenant never left? Was it them in the basement all that time? As you can imagine, I was out of there that night, and there was no way I was staying there. I stayed at a friend's for a few weeks. Nothing or no one had been found in relation to whoever it could have been in that basement. And the previous tenant before me has still never been located. The whole ordeal still creeps me out to this day. The fact that someone had been in the apartment whilst I slept, that could have been standing over me, watching me, moving freely around the place, it's like a nightmare. I'm lucky nothing more happened to me. A situation probably very rare to happen, but ever since then, I have never looked to rent anywhere else off of Craigslist. My name is Isaac. I'm a 28-year-old from the US. I currently live in New York, and this is one of the scariest things I can say that has ever happened to me. To get around, I often take the subway as my main mode of transport. To me, I find it's the easiest way to get around, and what I feel the quickest. It was a weekend, and I was heading back home from a works night that I had attended. My original plan was only to be out for a few hours, but after a couple of drinks, things change, and I had been out a lot longer than I had intended. With it being so late, I still decided to take the train back home. I had done this numerous times, so getting the train back alone at night was nothing new to me. Although I wasn't at the usual station I would get back home from, it was all the same. As I descended the steps down onto the platform, I wasn't surprised to see it was deserted. Being alone on a quiet, empty platform at night always has an eerie feeling to it, due to the location, I suppose. I'd arrived early for the train, so I walked down to the platform to take a seat and wait for it. As I waited there, listening to the uncomfortable silence, I began scrolling through my phone. It was what happened next that still chills me today. Out the corner of my eye, a flicker of light grabbed my attention. Looking up, I couldn't see anything. There was no light. Thinking I may have imagined it, I went back to my phone. But as I did that, it happened again. Out the corner of my eye, I saw a light flicker again. Looking back up, this time, I could clearly see a light flickering on and off in the distance coming from the tunnel. Intrigued and curious to what it was, I continued to stare as it continued to flicker. It wasn't like a track light just flickering. I could tell it was something else. Standing up, invested, I began to approach the edge of the tunnel so that I could get a better look as to what it was. As I got closer, it was then it became clearer to me what it was. I stopped in my tracks as the light stopped flickering. From where the light was, I could see the movement of a figure in the darkness down by the tracks as it came forward. I was shocked to see a man standing down there as he looked back up at me smiling. He must have been around his mid-50s. His gaunt appearance instantly sent a chill down my spine, as an uncomfortable feeling washed over me. The man proceeded to call out to me, saying, "Thank God I was there, that he needed my help, that his friend was injured and he needed my help." The man, all the while, glared at me, saying this. I was shocked to see someone down there, let alone someone asking for help. Not knowing what to do, I asked, where was his friend? The man's creepy smile grew as he beckoned me down to the tunnel with his hand.
"He's down here. He needs help. Come on, I'll show you,"
the man said, coaxing me into entering the tunnel. But there was no way I was entering a dark subway tunnel with anyone, let alone this man. On edge, I told the man, I could call for help. The man's smile faded from his mouth as I said that. His eyes pierced through me. He said no, and that he needed my help right then in that moment. The uncomfortable feeling grew inside me. I again asked him where his friend was and what the problem was. The man never answered. Instead, he just stood there motionless, for what seemed like an age, staring at me, until he slowly backed up into the darkness. Having just about had enough, I was about to walk away and get out of there, when I noticed what seemed to be more figures moving in the darkness of the tunnel. There seemed to be more than one person down there. Something wasn't right, and as I fought to see into the tunnel, it was then the man slowly re-emerged, this time, not alone. As he came out of the darkness, I saw another face slowly following him. As they both came closer, it was then I saw it, something that will always haunt me. I felt the color drain from me in that moment. As the man came forward, the person that I saw next to him was the decapitated head of a man stuck on a stick that the man held next to him. The lifeless eyes looking back at me as the man waved the stick around as he laughed at me. And I could hear more laughter coming from inside the tunnel. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Not willing to spend another second witnessing the horror in front of me, I sprinted back the way I'd come and out of the station. I was a shaking mess as I thought about what I'd just seen. I got a taxi back as I contemplated calling the police. But how could I tell them what I'd seen? How would it sound? Calling my friend, I got his advice, and eventually after a discussion, I ended up calling the police to report what I'd seen. Officers were sent to that station, but I don't think anything was ever found. At least I never heard otherwise. But what I did find out is that it is said and rumoured that there are people, communities, that live underground, that live in the subway tunnels, and after witnessing what I saw, I fully believe that is the case. Since that night, I never take a late train home or venture down into the subway in the early hours. I stick to other means of transport on late nights. I know some crazy things might happen in this city, but I never expected to see what I saw. From my experience, I urge you to be cautious when alone in a quiet subway at night. You never know what you might come across. Thank you for joining us and watching this chilling video. We hope you enjoyed this topic and you found the fear within. What other subjects would you like to hear soon? Let us know in the comments what creeps you out. If you're new here, say hello. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Become a part of the Horror Motives world. See you soon with another terrifying video.